welcome to this morning's series of panels. Now, one of the things and the themes that we'll sort of have here is an idea and a development very much on where we fit. So when we think about the first two panels that we have, I think the best context is actually to go back to the conversation that Marie and John Krakauer were having last night, right? Where John is recounting the story of Marie and Pat walking on a beach, right? And it's a conversation, about what's important. It's a conversation about values. And although that is really the beginning of this path and this story of our foundation, right? Again, there's a conversation between a husband and a wife, right? There's this unspeakable and unimaginable tragedy that happens, but then out of that tragedy, there's these points of continuity associated around values that we have the chance to talk about. And so then we can fast forward to 2009. Foundation will have been in existence for a number of different years. But then in that point in time, that is when we started the Scholar Program. And it's sort of interesting to think of what 10 years sort of means, right? That year, there were 52 scholars chosen. We've expanded that out to 60 a year, right? So just think about those numbers of moving from 52 people to now 635 in this community. Think about that for a second. You know, the operating budget grows by a factor of 5. By 5. The average scholarship that's awarded increases by a factor of 5 over the course of these 10 years. So in order to really put that sort of piece and some of those numbers in a much more human context, which I think is far, far more appropriate, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to invite back some of the members of that inaugural class of 2009. Now, they will be joined by the first Director of Programs and Scholarships here, Hunter Riley. Hunter, if you can go ahead and come out and join us. Hunter, thank you. And then again, it's also my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome to the stage Rob Anders, Lyndsey Anderson, and Aaron Contreras. Again, great representatives of what began at this point in time. Again, welcome back. And Hunter, the stage is yours, my friend.
Thank you, JD. Rob, Lyndsey, and Victor, as we knew him, because it came in as the application, but Aaron and I got to talk backstage, and really great to see all three of you. And thank you to those in the crowd for the shouts. I don't get that often. No, but JD called me about a month ago, or a little over a month ago, and asked if I'd be open to coming back. And the easy and quick answer was yes, but the reason it was easy and quick is because I live here in Chicago now. And so it was a much, even though it was a hot and sweaty commute, it was definitely something I wanted to carve time out to do, and hopefully be able to provide a little bit of backstory to the founding of the Tillman Scholars program specifically, but more so hand it over to these 2009 Tillman Scholars to give their reflections on the past 10 years and give them an opportunity to talk about the impact the foundations had on them and vice versa, the impact they've been able to have because of the foundation as a scholar class as whole and as individuals. 12 years ago, I met Marie Tillman at the Clinton School of Public Service when I was getting my Master's of Public Service there. It was the very start of a wild journey, seeing her and Alex Garwood, her brother-in-law and one of the board members here at the foundation, come on the stage and talk about the Pat Tillman Foundation, which was still a fledgling organization with its hands in a lot of different programming based on the different areas and locations that Pat had an impact in. His home area of San Jose, Arizona State, alongside the Arizona Cardinals. And in that, I actually rewatched the speech. Marie came up for about 5 minutes, talked about Pat, and talked about the organization, but handed it over to Alex, who really gave an introduction of what the foundation was doing at the time. And two things stood out in that conversation that he stated that tie to some of the values that JD was mentioning, and I think that you'll hear throughout this entire Pat Tillman Leadership Summit. The first was the idea of everyday leadership, and the next was leadership through action. Different mantras that the foundation has inserted into its mission throughout the years. And those things stuck with me as a 23-year-old grad student. And so I just wrote down the foundation as this is something I think I want to go work with after grad school, during grad school. Fast forward 6 months in New Orleans, just as hot and muggy as it is here today, I saw Marie walk down the street and said, that's Marie Tillman. She was in Little Rock earlier this year and had one of my professors reintroduce us, say, this is Hunter. He's interested in working with the foundation. And that is how it all started for me at the Pat Tillman Foundation. Marie and I started an email dialogue. I moved out to Arizona, started doing analysis, a stakeholder analysis of the Leadership Through Action program at Arizona State. And this is where, for me, again, the Tillman Scholars program starts. An email came through from Marie and the board that said, we want to do something to invest in military veterans and their spouses. There's a new post-9/11 GI Bill that's just been passed into law. They have a year to implement it. We've researched some of it. There's some gaps that we want to address. And as I sent some letters to JD last night and Michelle, we sent emails out to all the members of the Senate Veteran Affairs Committee, House Veteran Affairs, General Shinseki, President Obama, Vice President Biden, and flew up to D.C. for the inauguration in 2009 to start to implement what would be and to promote what would be the Tillman Scholars program. That is, in a nutshell, really where it started, but it really all started with these 3 individuals and the 49 others that were selected that year. To take you back to the 4 people who reviewed over 400 applications one hot summer in Arizona, because that's the one thing I criticize Arizona for is even if it's a dry heat, it's still a heat, and it's a miserable over 100-degree heat. And to sit in a room with Suzanne, Rory, and Nathan, who was our intern at the time, actually it was Tanner that year. Nathan was the next year, so Tanner, and read through these applications and start what would become this very sophisticated selection process that brought you all here. It was hard to really find that starting point, who to select. We worked with some university partners, Aaron from the University of Idaho, and 3 other university partners who presented their top applicants for us to approve, and that was the kickoff. So I wanted to just kick this off by giving these individuals an opportunity to tell them more about who they are now, but when we were reading their applications, we saw an Aaron Contreras who was going into law school, or in law school, and wanting to finish his JD and go into the JAG Corps. A Lyndsey Anderson, who was at NYU studying museum studies, who wanted to focus on access issues in museums internationally, but specifically in New York. And a Rob Anders, who was doing his MPP at Georgetown, wanting to focus on environmental issues. The interesting thing about these 3 is that hasn't changed. What you've done in the last 10 years follows the path that you said to the Pat Tillman Foundation, with this scholarship, with this opportunity, I will make this impact. I will achieve this goal in my professional career. The bit of truth that I always like to pass on in this process, and then I'll hand it over, is that no one is singularly linear. And so everyone can have what their goal is, their vision. And to tie back the foundation to each of you all's vision for yourselves, when the foundation started, when I was introduced to it, its vision didn't necessarily involve this group of 600-plus people. It involved making an impact, uniting and empowering amazing leaders. And it just so happens that this is the community that's stuck. And this is the reflection back 10 years of how the Pat Tillman Foundation found its footing and could grow and really compound its impact. So the 3 of you, what you said on paper is what you do now. Introduce yourself to the group, karaoke song included, but tell us where you've gone in the last 10 years since you wrote those words. Rob?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Can I start with a public apology?
Yes.
Okay, so so where our lives intersected for the first time was the phone call. And just to give you the context, I had just come off of active duty. We had just moved and set up shop, set up our new house, my wife and I, in Washington, D.C., a couple weeks before starting at Georgetown, a couple weeks before our firstborn son was due to arrive. Everything was, full throttle. And I had applied because I didn't really realize how expensive Georgetown was going to be, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, So you called, and I can picture that moment. You called, and I guess it was a flip phone back then, so it was like this. And you're like, hey, this is Hunter Riley. Just want to let you know that, we've selected you for the Pat Tillman Foundation, Tillman Scholars program. It's like, okay, thank you. And that was about it. That was it. All right. I got other stuff to do. That's cool. Put it in the rucksack. I'm moving out. And little did I know, on the other end of that phone, he's got balloons in the ceiling, streamers ready to go, and everybody's got party hats. I learned that later. So I stole that moment from you, even though you were excited. But I was excited, and really back then, in full candor, for me going to grad school was to buy time, essentially, to come off of a very intense period of active duty. And grad school was a way for me to sort of recalibrate and readjust and reassess my passions and my goals. And that application was part of that, and it was an important part for me to help sort of shape that. So I won't dig too deep into to that depth there, but I went to Georgetown to study public policy with a focus on environmental and energy policy. I wound up doing the Presidential Management Fellows Program after grad school. That's something that's available to just about everybody here. If you're interested in that track, please talk to me. That was another tremendous opportunity. I stayed at the U.S. Department of Energy for 5 years, working in various jobs and leadership positions before moving to industry. And now I develop solar farms across the eastern United States for a global renewable energy company that does big wind and solar. So very much along, like you said, very much along that track. For me, this is sort of the front lines of the energy industry. As an infantry officer, I've sort of considered myself to be drawn to the front lines in big picture issues and problems, and this is a way for me to get after that. So I'm very much, I feel that way as an infantry officer on the front lines of the renewable energy industry now, and that's very exciting.
But you're transitioning out now.
Of that industry?
Well, talk a little more about what you're doing down in Houston.
So on the side, I should say that I'm also still in the National Guard part-time. I'm assigned to the District of Columbia National Guard, and I'm the director of the Legislative Affairs team in the District of Columbia National Guard. But in addition to that, my wife and I have founded the Tillman Academy, which is a proposed public charter school, K-12 charter school, just north of Houston, Texas. So this is in the application process, very much in the development process. We've built a founding executive board. We've built a team of advisors. We've gained a tremendous amount of traction from senior political leaders and very influential people in the community. And we've got our website up. We just got our 501c3 approved. We are starting to rock and roll. We've got some major strategic decisions about how to proceed from here, but we're looking at opening the doors to a bunch of school kids here, if all goes well, in August of 2021. And that school is K through 12, focusing on leadership, character, and civic virtue. Marie was, so gracious to lend her enthusiasm and support for us to use the namesake, because that model, is in keeping with what Pat was all about.
And we'll get back to this,
Yep.
because this leads into, some of the vision and how to carry those values through. But,
Right on.
It's just amazing that to see that 10 years later, the relationship even.
Yeah.
To be able to be approved for a name.
Well,
is a
thank
big
you.
deal in this foundation.
And yes, and that's no small ask. So yeah, when I half ignored you on that phone call, I had no idea that this school concept would.
I don't remember because we probably said, well, that guy wasn't as cool as he looked on paper.
We chose
It's like wrong. So, I mean, it's trial and error the first year. So sorry. I think we all did well with the three of you. Lyndsey, tell us where you are now. Still in New York.
Yes.
You can tell the personal side of our story, or I can.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll start about 10 years ago, 2009, when I applied to and was accepted to the foundation. I had just finished my first year in this master's program for museum studies, which was just really what became the ultimate dream for me. Fast forward or rewind a little bit. I grew up in a really small town in Iowa, kind of a suburb of a suburb of a suburb of Des Moines. And so I didn't have access to very much culture or diversity. My father sold cars, my mom worked at a grocery store, and so I just didn't grow up going to museums or accessing cultural spaces. When I ended up joining the National Guard, I did deploy early in 2003. And I spent some of my downtime actually rummaging through the post and finding discarded AK-47 bayonets or images of Saddam Hussein that had yet to be destroyed early on. And I really became infatuated with the way that these objects could tell stories, and I could really connect to the people that were living and creating these. And it was a really humanizing experience to be communing with these objects in a new way that I just hadn't had exposure to. So after my deployment, I changed my degree to art history and anthropology. I did my first internship in a museum and knew that breaking down these barriers to access to these cultural institutions was really important to me. And so I made a promise when I joined the foundation to commit my career to working to ensure museums are accessible to people regardless of their ability or disability or socioeconomic background. So I live in New York City now, work at a museum on the Upper East Side. My role is the Director of Visitor Experience. So before any exhibition is created, I'm ensuring that the floor plans are accessible for people with wheelchairs. I work on interpretive materials to make sure that people have a lens or different journeys through which they can see themselves in the institution. I work on creating programs for all sorts of visitors, again, to ensure accessibility. So for the most part, I've worked in museums for the past decade. I took a short detour to work with first-generation college students from low-income backgrounds on college persistence, career readiness, and mentorship. And I think more than anything, that really fueled my fire to stay committed to breaking down barriers and ensuring access to these wonderful resources that are in our country are available for everyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll start with my favorite karaoke song too, because I know that was an
Yeah,
important.
Rob forgot that part.
Yeah, Bloodhound Gang, Roof is on Fire. So Saturday, it's down.
Rob, you can tell your.
I told
karaoke.
everybody yesterday that
You already got that.
my 3-year-old daughter makes me sing Let It Go.
Okay.
Aw.
Like she makes me sing it loud.
Yeah. So we can make you sing it loud.
Well, no, she can. Let me be clear.
So just a quick. We'll talk a little about the small world of the Tillman community, and I mean, we are telling some stories backstage about the way paths cross. But the very first Tillman community small world experience for me was Lyndsey Anderson seeing my name on her apartment in New York, H. Riley, and in our conversation about what she would be doing with the program and probably engaging her a little bit more in New York as one of the first New York scholars, and that's a very big support base for the foundation. She asked, like, did you live in New York? In the interview, you talked a lot about some museums there, and I saw H. Riley on my building. My twin brother, who also is H. Riley Haynes, had lived in an apartment right below Lyndsey.
Same building, exactly below me, same bedroom. We're like that.
It was very, very small world, very interesting, like start to the first class that, only 52, and you can see how intertwined everyone is. With 600, I can't imagine the connections that are happening in the crowd, but we'll get into that because I want you all to tell a little more about that and some experiences I know at least you've had, Rob. Mm-hmm. Aaron happens to be married to a Tillman Scholar, so the two Tillman Scholars from Pocatello, Idaho. But tell us what you're doing now and how that JD's panned out.
Well, so I'll start off by saying that we were actually married before we were scholars. Apparently, there was some idea that we met. There's nothing wrong with that. If you guys want to start a relationship, go ahead. But we had been married for like 10 years when we became scholars. So my background was, so I'd been a National Guard, enlisted, then I was an aviation officer. I deployed to Afghanistan, and I came back, and in all honesty, I was not in the best place. That's been something that I've kind of been addressing. But I had decided to go to law school because I felt like, there's a lot of chance things that kind of led me there, but I felt like that was something I could do, like kind of a higher education, graduate degree. I came from a family where my mom did not go to college. Well, she went a little bit. My dad finished his bachelor's when I was a junior in college. So it wasn't, stressed. Or available. Anyway, so I decided to go to law school, and I came into the foundation, like Hunter said, with Operation Education through University of Idaho. They had selected me for that scholarship at University of Idaho because that is a scholarship that University of Idaho gives or provides for disabled veterans, which I had qualified for after my deployment to Afghanistan. But I had hoped one of the things I'd looked at was the JAG Corps of maybe transitioning from aviation that had, caused some certain injuries, and that I could continue to serve in the JAG Corps, which is what happened. And so I did that. My wife, actually, and I wish she was here because she's a much better speaker than me, but she did school psychology and school counseling, and so came back from Afghanistan, and I started law school, and we had our third child, my first year law school, and then she was doing grad school, and I was doing law school, and then it was actually in our third year that was when the Tillman Military Scholar program started, and we were selected as that after having the previous year been an Operation Education Scholar with the University of Idaho. Since then, I was in private practice for a little bit, and then I've been in active duty. And honestly, I think what I saw was the foundation, and I guess my tie was this ability or this support for people that have given so much, and then to kind of recognize that. And on top of it, I'm becoming more aware of this now as I'm now kind of dealing with some of the stuff that I should have dealt with, over a decade ago. Recognizing also that, the sacrifice of those, dependents, those, spouses and children and those. And so that has really been eye-opening. I could talk more about the JAG Corps, but I've had some really great opportunities to use my experience as an Apache pilot and also as an attorney to teach people about the impact really of what we do in war. You have the law of armed conflict, what is allowed and not allowed, and what that really means. And I think that fortunately for me, I've had that personal experience to kind of make it more, I hope, relevant for people that I have taught that. And then the most recently, I've been actually working with some of our South American and Central American partners, working on their legal systems. And so I've done that for the last 2 years. All throughout Central and South America. And now I'm currently transitioning from the Army, and I'm kind of looking to see what the next phase is going to be.
The interesting thing about the representation here from the class of 2009 is the varied backgrounds and career paths. I think early on with the foundation, obviously there's some core values that drive the type of person we're looking for, but there's always conversation, and I had the joy this year of sitting on a selection committee and listening to the conversations led by JD about the type of class, defining the class as a collective. And I think the commonalities between each of you in this room are the core values you carry, and probably the type of person you are as an individual. But how do you define a class of scholars? And the same conversation was happening back then. Do we have someone studying environmental studies, law, and museum studies? How do we bring the diverse career paths, but also conversations? Like I said, at the very, very micro level, it's the conversations you have here at the summit, the conversations you have with your roommate, maybe the person you are on the same flight home with. Those are the conversations that drive the power of this network. And I think, at least from what I witness, drive the impact more than anything, because it has to start with that. So I don't want to get into the small world insights just yet, but think about that as we continue the conversation here on stage. But one of the prompts I sent last night is looking back 10 years, and I sent myself an email specifically, what did you think you were getting into? 10 years ago, when you got this call, or maybe it was from me, it was an email, what did you think you were getting into?
I think for me, it was so unknown, right? There hadn't been a precedent set, and much like Rob's experience, I knew I was receiving a scholarship, but I had no idea what the potential of what I believe is now more of a fellowship and a community that was intertwined. So again, it was really vague. I knew Pat's legacy and his story, and it was something I was humbly excited to be associated with. But beyond the scholarship element, I think it was really unclear to us what really the potential of the organization was.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar. I had done, actually, I think I wrote about it in my application, that I had, in Afghanistan, we had done a lot of operations out of FOB Luara, which was also referred to as FOB Tillman because of the proximity to where that occurred. And then I actually flew security for a congressional investigatory team that was continuing with some of those, investigations. And so I think that was the biggest thing. Like I was really awed and inspired by the Tillman, by Pat Tillman's, story and what had occurred, and then also what the foundation in those early stages was looking to do. I mean, like, I don't think we had an idea that this is what it's going to be, and it's still growing. But I think I was just, humbled also to be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, coming off active duty for me was like stepping into a wilderness, right? I mean, just where do you go? What do you do? And there's, at the time, and this for me was 2008, there's just a myriad of different foundations out there, different opportunities, stuff was bubbling up. And that, that's how I stumbled on the application, was, again, looking at the expense proposition at Georgetown and how do you manage that? What are the opportunities? And so starting out, I was just looking to try and make that work financially. And so many of the other ones that I applied to really were just that. It's like, hey, we liked your application. Here's a check. Thanks. And that was it. And so that was kind of the context of my introduction to Pat Tillman Foundation. But my association was pretty deep, right? So I was in Afghanistan in Paktika province in 2004 and 2005. My soldiers and I were obviously well aware of his story, in real time, and we were just in the next province south, when he was killed. So that was very much a part of my deployment experience going in. So again, as Aaron mentioned, sort of that honor and that sort of association was immediate and pretty profound and very different from the other, the context of the other financial opportunities out there. But I didn't know it would be a relationship, and I love the word fellowship that you use because that's it. And I think you're going to probably pull at those strings a little bit more. But I didn't know. I didn't know the near-term target for me was get through grad school, make that work, and this was a help for that. Very much a near-term sort of outlook on things.
So let's fast forward a year, and I think there's been some photos that Michelle's been clicking through. These are some of my favorite parts. For 5 years, I got to run the selection process, and when the phone calls are everyone on the foundation team knows are my favorite part as well. Just to make a call and to hear the reaction.
I know. Thank you for rubbing that in. Thank you for rubbing it in.
There's no reaction from Rob, but most people are like speechless, and then
yes. Yeah.
I can recall in private some of the less PG responses we've gotten. But the other best part is when we email and ask you, say, hey, you've been selected for this. Can you send us some photos for the press release, et cetera, et cetera? And if you go back, Michelle, I know you saw these ones. This is just a selection. I have about 20 from each of these individuals. Well, maybe like 5 from Aaron and 20 from Lyndsey and Rob. They were eager to share. But I, as a civilian, number one, to be amongst this group of individuals who've served has always been an honor. And then to see these cool photos has also just been something spectacular because this is not my experience, at least not my world experience. This moment to start to get to know the scholars better, because at this point you see them on paper, but this is the first time in most cases that you see their face. And the photos streaming into the foundation email account was always a special one for me. So I was digging through last night my old files and finding some of these, and digging through some photos from the inaugural Pat Tillman Leadership Summit. So I think the other photos that Michelle had up there, in particular this one, you can see that I don't know if Rob's in this photo, but there's a photo from Walter Reed that I sent last night that has Rob standing next to Aaron with Lyndsey, 2 people in front of them. Yeah. So all 3 of you came to the Pat Tillman Leadership Summit that inaugural year. So obviously at that point you started to realize, wait, this is more than just the money. Why did you come to the summit? Like, what drew you in at that point?
If I can just draw a quick contrast, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it sounds like you have the pictures. But I remember it essentially being I think it was a conference room. It was like one small conference room. And we were all there. And I think there was some coffee in the back. And it was for like 4 hours in the afternoon. And we kind of did a round robin, very simple. I think we did some activities on the Hill. I think we walked around the Hill a little bit. And it was in Washington, D.C. And that was it. And that is very different from this. You know?
You popped in and out, though, that year because you were local.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you recall? And what drew you to come?
Yeah, I think the moment that I realized that it was more than just a transaction of cash, that I think people are the capital that the foundation has, and the greater numbers of people that we have to get to know one another, the greater impact we have. So I love networking, and I saw this as an opportunity. It's just so rare that you get to be amongst people in so many different fields that are working at the top of their class, the most ambitious, coming together. I mean, we all go to conferences, but we really are working with people that we relate to and have similar experiences. And I saw this immediately as an opportunity to meet, lawyers, politicians, just so many different people in one room, and people that really were hungry to make an impact in their community. So I just wanted to get to know, meet great people.
I think it was very similar. I mean, we had just finished school and were starting different jobs, and I think we were able to, I remember right, because it was the following year after we'd finished, and so it was just kind of a continuation. Like, I think I had always seen it as like, this is the relationship, and when that came out of like, hey, we have this leadership summit, again, it was new, they're figuring it out. We were just interested to continue the relationship with the foundation, after what had been done for us, I guess.
Can I add one thing?
Please.
So what was very different right away was this aspect from the foundation, which has never changed, was this push and a pull. So unlike the other foundations and scholarship opportunities that were out there, like I mentioned, this one has a push and a pull to it that, well, let me explain. So the push, well, starts with that grant money, right? The scholarship itself. But the push came from, well, the push was a mandatory 10 hours of community service that was tied to that. Is that still a thing? I mean, this is, I don't know, this was a controversy in the reception last night, whether or not you have to do 10 hours of community service per semester. And I hadn't factored that into my homework schedule. But that was pretty substantial. But I'm like, hey, I'll go do that. That's interesting in itself, because that's a little bit outside my comfort zone at the time there. So that's sort of the push. Like, hey, the Tillman Foundation is pushing you to do that. But then the initial summit and then the social aspect of this was the pull. It's like, we're going to push you to do that, but we're going to pull you in. We're going to push you to do this. We're going to pull you back in. And that was really interesting to me, because I came off of active duty, just stepping back. I was a senior at West Point, starting my senior year at West Point on September 11th, 2001. And, poised, right, well positioned to go after the big problems of the day. Like, and that's where I've sort of gravitated to ever since. What are the big problems? Where can I be on the front lines? How do I address those big problems? And that, for me, going to grad school was very much to do that. And then Pat Tillman's like, hey, you need to go out in your community, and you need to go pull weeds over here, and you need to go, pick up a paintbrush here. And it was not in my thinking to do that. But it was mandatory and tied to the financial contribution. And that was a great push for me because, and this happens a lot in Washington, D.C., of course, where you're going after big picture goals, but their impact needs now, today, right there. Go do that. Make that change. And so that right away from the start of the foundation was evident to me and different, just very different. And so that dimension of the push and the pull, what you mentioned is, well, and everyone talks about the diversity. Everyone is pushing their own boundaries in different directions, but they're all getting pulled back in the same way. You heard JD talk about this yesterday, and the other members of the staff about unite and empower, and that's the same concept of pulling everyone in to unite the team, the fellowship, the community, and then empowering them to go back out and make an impact. And whether that impact is right down the street today or tomorrow, or that impact is 30 years from now, and whatever big picture, lofty goals that people have, and everybody has them. Those are the key dimensions to me that were evident right from day one of the foundation.
I like that, the push and the pull. So kind of thinking again on 10 years, this is as I said backstage, a panel about nostalgia somewhat, looking back 10 years. And this question is tied to that. What's been your most memorable Tillman Scholar moment?
I think I'll briefly, well, first off, I'll say that is my lovely wife there on the far right. So just in case you're
Shout out to Bonnie.
Probably the most memorable, I think it would just be a lot of little ones. I mean, like, and not even, I mean, obviously, all of the events that I've done with the foundation have been amazing. But, I think I was talking to JD, I can't remember when it was, but I know originally they gave us that poster of Pat, and I've had that in every office I've been in. And I think for me, that would be the most memorable. Not so much the poster, but being able to talk to people about, like, what, his legacy means, and then what my relationship with that legacy. And, I don't know if any of those people have been selected. I don't think they have. But, talking to people about applying, like what the opportunity is, and just kind of, remembering that and making that, that connection, that difference. I'd have to say that.
I think for me the most impactful was myself, Marie, and another scholar did an article in People magazine. And one of the mentions was work that I was doing for the visually impaired within museums. And that actually had a ripple effect. I was contacted by international institutions to help consult and give feedback, which I was so thrilled to do. The Aspen Art Museum, the director, read about that and brought me in for their first educator in residence. So I spent a week there evaluating their programs and providing feedback. So I thought that was a great example of kind of the ripple effect of what the scholar community has. So, now we have 635 scholars that Tillman has influenced, plus thousands and thousands more, but this experience and opportunity allowed me to impact a multitude of institutions and people in programming as well. So that was memorable and, impactful.
I remember that photo shoot in West Village.
Yep.
You and Corey Calloway.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's fun.
For me, what's astounding is the various dimensions of how the network intersects and overlaps. Just this morning, I sat down next to a guy who served for 20 years in the Navy and happened to serve very closely with one of my best buddies from high school. And that sort of sparked the conversation. But here we are in a network around a certain series of core values. I just got assigned as a mentor to a new Tillman Scholar who happened to be an upperclassman back at West Point. And he lived a couple doors down the hall from me. And now I'm the upperclassman. Is Riley here? Who's the upperclassman now, right? So that's cool. But
Rob's on stage. You're in the audience. Sorry.
Just saying, you're gonna have to wait another 10 years. My favorite Tillman story, though, is related to the school project that we're working on. So my wife and I knew that we were starting the conversation in Washington, D.C., but knew that was not the right place to do it. We moved for family reasons to Houston, and by the grace of God, we are in the right place and fertile ground for this project. And so we've started to externalize that conversation and try and get in the community. And anyhow, one Saturday afternoon, my son was going on to a soccer game, and I looked across the field, and there was a guy wearing a Tillman Academy or a Pats Run shirt, and his son was coming off the field, and I'm like, I know that guy. And I was wearing my Pats Run shirt at the time, which I wear all the time now.
Yeah.
But we went up and had a conversation. Terry, would you raise your hand? This is Terry Weaver. We live right in the same area. But Terry is doing amazing things in our community there, and has built an incredible network of folks in our community, from super heavy hitters and politically influential folks to everyday folks. Unbelievable. So we struck a conversation, and 2 sentences into that conversation, Terry said, I want to help. How can I help? What can I do? Is Tillman Scholar? Tillman Scholar? How can I help? What can I do? Let me know what I can do. And man, this school project, this giant dream that we have, is would be nowhere close to what it is without Terry's support and all the effort that he's doing with his Vel Institute, which I hope you'll get to learn more about what he's doing, connecting veterans, entrepreneurs, and leaders in our community. He just published a book called The Evolution of a Leader. You should go get that book. He didn't ask me. but he's he's just an incredible addition
this
to
was
our
random.
team. And totally random.
Yeah.
And we should have found him on, Tillman Connect. We should have done that, but we didn't, and it's sort of serendipitous.
And there was no happy hour in Houston yet.
No.
Okay.
But so
That's the problem.
But what Terry has brought to the table, and he's a member of our founding executive board, and what he's brought to the table is something that I don't have, and we wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's by far my favorite story, and it's very compelling and necessary to us getting to that next level. So thanks, Terry, and thanks to the whoever makes those Pats Run shirts.
Michelle and team, so thanks, Michelle.
Thanks for the shirts.
So those moments, the one that Rob just described, I know they're not few and far between. They're probably pretty frequent now at the size that this network is, and pretty special if they go as deep as what's happened with Rob and Terry. I want to transition to question and answer, but before I do so, I want to get a show of hands. Any other 2009 scholars in the room? I know I see some 2010. So 2010, do you guys and girls mind holding your hands up? You got 3. I can't see back there. Is that Nathan? Who is that? Okay.
Oh.
I see you, Bear. Chris and Terry. You're the only 3 2010? So the first 2 classes were the first classes invited to the Pat Tillman Leadership Summit. I'd push it to the 3 of you and the 3 of you to engage your classes even further. Get them here in the future. I know time goes by and it's really hard to make commitments, but to have that opportunity to reach back into 10 years of a network is going to make this even more impactful. Question and answers, where do I go for that? Oh, yes. I'm supposed to introduce Slido.com. If you would, pull up your Wi-Fi. Slido.com is you put it in your browser, and it pops up as app.sli.do. So Slido.com, though, will bring you there. And enter the hashtag PTLS2019. This is practice for the rest of the panels. And once you get there, type in a question, and I actually, as moderator, can see what you're asking and can bring that to the panel. Don't everyone ask one at once.
Although they
Slow
could.
down.
Yes.
Although they could.
And you'll see it up there as well. This is from Anonymous.
Someone in the room.
And we can actually, you can like them to push them up to the top if they all come up once. But we'll go ahead with this one. What do you think is the best change to the foundation since 2009?
Ooh.
You can stay anonymous.
I mean, I could say I'm a big fan of Tillman Connect. I know that at the very beginning we had some sort of online platform that didn't have the same functionality, but I've reached out to several Tillman Scholars already for informational interviews when I was applying to new jobs. So I've really used that and leveraged that tool as a way to connect with folks that I hadn't yet met before. So I think it's a great resource. If you haven't signed up, you should.
As someone who's sitting on the outside now, I love seeing that the foundation is invested so much into the professional opportunities for scholars and the community opportunities. I think the connectivity of this group is the strength of it, and so I believe that that's, again, not as a scholar, but looking from the outside, knowing it's not just about the scholarship dollars, it's about the community. Any other answers to what's the thing you... I can't read these as fast as you all are. Everyone's read it already. Anonymous. That's okay, that's Terry. I thought it might be, can you pull up that photo of Dan and I? I thought it might be the new executive director, Dan Petrell. Okay, we'll jump to this one because it's specific to Houston. I live in Houston and have a 5-year-old. My husband and I are wanting something different for education. Can you tell me what your vision is for the Tillman Academy?
Yes.
This is Marisol.
Yeah, no, yes. So real quick, the niche there in our area is if you're looking for a K through 12 model, one cohesive educational ecosystem environment, you got to go to a private school. Everything else is fractured into, early elementary to another school across town to another school for all the way up through high school, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it puts kids into a constant state of flux, if that's a sentence. So the K through 12 model is not available in the public sector. The other key feature is a classical liberal arts curriculum, which gets back to sort of the basic fundamental real emphasis on literacy as the catalyst for a lifelong learning. And then the emphasis is on leadership, character, and civic virtue. And so therein lies, Pat's example. And so it's K through 12. Our vision for the school is that students, when they graduate grade 12, they know who they are, where they are in space and time, and have a firm grounding in leadership, character, civic virtue, and understand what their capabilities are to go, again, like I talked about, go tackle big picture issues, but also make an impact immediately. At grade 12, and that's a tall order. We all remember when we're getting out of high school. It's another big change, but it's a need. Montgomery County is, I think, ranked 6th out of 3,200 counties in the country in terms of population growth. Got mediocre schools, so the choices there are limited, and again, that K through 12 ecosystem enables that sort of leadership design, whereby you've got young students who can see their role models, you've got older students who have accountability to the younger students. There's looping programs and very purposeful mentorship opportunities for children, just to expose them to what it means, again, leadership, character, and civic virtue. So this is really exciting. It all stems back to certainly Pat Tillman's example, and we'd love to use your help. We need help, and students too, right? So that's great.
So this next question is specific to Aaron, and then we have a whole storm of questions that are more broad to the whole group and align with some of the closing questions I have. But Aaron, specifically, what sort of challenges have you faced that you talked about, and are you facing changing and are you facing changing and impacting the legal systems in countries in South America?
So if you're asking about personal challenges and then the ones about the South America, I guess I could talk about both. I think you mean just about South America, although I'm happy to talk about my personal challenges. South America, so the main countries I worked with are, well, Central America and South America, but Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Peru, Colombia, some with Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, I guess a little bit. Some of it is, well, one, most of those legal systems are changing, at least in not only in their civil systems, but also in their military systems. They have, and obviously my kind of experiences with the military side of it, a lot of those countries have lost what we have in the U.S. of like our military jurisdiction. Like a commander doesn't have the opportunity in Argentina to court-martial one of his soldiers. In a lot of those countries, they have to basically talk to some prosecutor and go, hey, my soldier didn't show up to work today. Well, they don't care. They don't have that same, they didn't shave, they're not in the right uniform. There's nothing, doesn't matter to them. But not just that, they are transitioning their legal systems to an adversarial system like ours, from an inquisitorial, which is very different. And for the law students and lawyers, you know the difference, but it really just changes more of the emphasis on the prosecutor and defense instead of the judge. It's really just the expertise. A lot of them don't have the expertise, and there's just a lack of training. I've done some training on trial advocacy in Peru a couple times, and just there's a lot of people that are very motivated to figure that out, but also a lot that just don't really understand, or they're from an old system that very, very distinct from what they're going through now.
So these next couple questions I'll gather from the group, and these have been liked up. How can new scholars make the most of this weekend? I think that really ties in the question I had, like coming into this fresh. What are you trying to soak in from this weekend if you were to pass on some advice?
Briefly, I'll say the connections. I know I have probably not done as good as I could, over the 10 years. But I think that is a big part of it, is you get to know, like what Lyndsey was saying, people from across, one, the U.S., but also from across different industries, programs, whatever it is, and you can get that expertise from them. And so that's what I would say to make the most of. Is just, if it's finding them on Tillman Connect, if it's sharing phone numbers, whatever, but just making the most of those connections.
Yeah, just echo that and dovetail that with Tillman Connect. So if you can put faces to names that you're looking for online, that's a real powerful tool. And you can search and query that. But I think we're going to be all crammed on a boat later this afternoon, so there's going to be some rapid fire introductions. Take advantage of that, right? Try and meet as many people as you can. I'm an infantry guy. I'm not a big boat guy.
And yeah.
It's going to be fun. We'll have a good time.
I think the only thing I could add to the building connections, which I do think that's what this is about, is as you meet new people, I would encourage you to think of people within your own networks that this new scholar that you're meeting may benefit from as a connection. So really, again, thinking about what you have to offer within your own network and how you might connect others outside of the Tillman Scholar community with people that are doing interesting things as well.
Yeah, there's also perks. Lyndsey does have museum passes. That was a question asked. The Contreras lived in Italy for how many years?
3.5.
You had a place to stay if you're in Italy. So seriously, there's, my network extends out to this. I'm not a scholar, but I was part of the Facebook group for a little bit and had a PA scholar looking for a 1-month residency in OBGYN, and I have a good friend who lives in Ogden, Utah, and they've become good friends now. She stayed in her basement, an extra bedroom and bath, and worked at her facility for a month. So don't hesitate to ask. I think that's one of the things to take advantage of. It is not just make the connection and have that LinkedIn relationship, but actually ask scholars for support. I want to ask this other question, which I think is pretty profound. I don't know what just popped up.
I don't either.
But this one is it's seemingly more profound. What's a routine, and I think hard to answer, what is a routine act that you incorporate into your daily life to help ensure that you are always present and living up to PTF's values?
Man.
It's hard to answer.
So I'll say that is a tough question.
More questions for Lyndsey about free passes.
So what I'd say about that though is, so without going into all the details about, you don't need my whole personal story, but like, I was an Apache pilot in Afghanistan, and it was, let's say, intense. I mean, we were in a lot of firefights and those type of things, and so dealing with that afterwards, was significant, still is, and so that's a big part of right now. I'm finally actually transitioning out of the military, and so that has always been a challenge for me of just being kind of present and being engaged, and so I'm improving that every day, and so I think for me it's more just. And again, this is on a personal note, but like I was so caught up in my own kind of issues that I didn't necessarily see those things that other people were dealing with. And even just in the last couple months, I actually was doing some group therapy with some other veterans that have similar experiences, and that has been so I didn't go to school, which now I'm like, man, why didn't I go into psychology or psychiatry or something? But law does not necessarily provide that same connection. But I'm seeing the benefit of that, of just like, sharing with other people and understanding what they've also gone through. And then it's opened me up to like, and obviously my wife's amazing, but she was, for the first time, now that I've kind of opened to that, like she was telling me about stuff, some really significant challenges that she kind of went through when I was deployed that, for 10 years she didn't tell me because I was kind of stuck in my own stuff, and then she also was like, well, mine's kind of minor compared to having people try to kill you all the time. And I don't agree with that. I mean, it's not. It's significant. Like what our spouses, what our family, what our, they go through, it's significant. So like, I think for me, I mean, that has been the challenge and kind of my goal of just kind of, I've now finally been making some better strides in that, and trying to focus on what I can do and kind of living up to that goal of just being really just a better person, and I think kind of inspired by the Tillman legacy.
I think just real quick to add to that, I totally concur. The core ideas on a day-to-day basis is sort of at a micro level is sort of commitment and impact. Like I talked about that sort of pick up a paintbrush and make an immediate impact on something today, right where you are. That's hard to do. I mean, we're all busy people, and there's a crush of different things vying for our attention. So I really try hard, and sort of the phone is an easy example. To put that, be very disciplined about that. When I come home, at the end of the day, that's somewhere else, and I am 100% with my family, and those are golden hours for me. I mean, that to me is my full-time job, being a husband and a father. And so being disciplined and recognizing that we're all capable of having that immediate impact with a focused level of commitment at that micro level, because that adds up very quickly over time.
Lyndsey?
I mean, it's challenging. I think I find myself slipping like others just to kind of stay motivated at times. And I will say that I frequently rewatch a documentary on Pat. I did it right before I came, and it just really seeing his selflessness, his scrappiness, his ability to kind of not be afraid to ruffle feathers and go against the grain is always just kind of like a resettling for me. It kind of rebalances. So I would encourage you to watch stories on Pat, read about him more, and I think it's just a good reminder of our capabilities as well. But I might have to do a routine practice a little bit more moving forward.
So we're coming to the close of the panel. There are some questions that were definitely individually targeted at Lyndsey and some more to you, Rob. So for those of you who asked those, sorry we didn't have time, but you do have time to talk with these individuals here at the summit. And I had a call to action seemed to be on the agenda, and I didn't really come ready with one, but have thought of one as we've been having this conversation. And to close out my story and not to get into what I'm doing now is someone was asking, because this is such a special part of my own professional career and a chapter in it. The thing that I see being the most beneficial for any of you here today is what I mentioned earlier, which is not just to connect surface level with someone that you're sitting next to, but to connect at a deeper level. And the very tangible way I think you can do that is just ask for their cell phone number and exchange text. Someone new this weekend. That gets the interconnectivity of this community down to that next level, and then to the next level, and to the next level. And the depths keep going deeper if you can do that one-to-one with someone new this week, as well as reconnect with individuals. I love seeing some folks here. Jeff, all the way from Oregon. It's good to see some old faces in the crowd, as well as some new ones. And I think that's a way to take this community to the next level and make it as personal as it can be, because then professionally, when you have those personal connections that are so deep, you're gonna have the impacts that you see Terry and Rob having in Houston, and other stories that you've probably heard in the past about how the Tillman community has come together to make an impact more collectively, as well as what you're doing individually. Thank you again, JD, for having me here, to the foundation staff, and if you invite me back, I'll come back.
Indeed, indeed. Always. And Hunter, Rob, Lyndsey, Aaron, thank you. Aaron, thank you for reminding us of those little memories, right? Lyndsey, thank you for reminding us that people are our capital in this community. Rob, for that push and that pull, the power of Tillman swag, right? Of serendipity being our friend, wherever that might be. And then Hunter, this was so much more than nostalgia. It was. And if anything, we're redefining what nostalgia means in terms of the touchstones of what it really means from a human perspective, to be a part of a community that really seeks to unite and empower themselves. So again, for each of y'all, thank you so very, very much for listening.